In one of my last videos, I talked about how the evils of the past are still here. Nazis, communists, occultists, devil worshippers, people who would partake in um, sinister occult rituals which involve human sacrifice. These people are still around. They are still here. They are amongst us. And there is another evil that we don't talk about so much unless we're giving a history lesson that is still here, and that is the evil of human experimentation. When we talk about human experimentation, we will say that, well, that's something that the Nazis did, that's something that the US government was involved in under the eugenic policies of the past. But human experimentation, come on, I mean, that's just something that you would hear in a History Channel documentary or something like that. But it's still amongst us. It still happens. And it's done by so-called reputable, established institutions. For those of you who don't believe me and you want to see a very recent example of this, I would encourage you to Google Glenwood Resource Center. It is in Glenwood, Iowa. What happens in Iowa, right? How many people live in Iowa? 3 million people? Nothing happens over there except for some pretty creepy stuff. They were human experiments that were done in Glenwood Resource Center. I believe they began in 2017. They continued on. There was an investigation done by the DOJ, the Department of Justice. They intervened. They investigated the facility. They found that elderly people with horrible disabilities, specifically intellectual disabilities, were in horrible environments. Conditions were terrible. And there was a doctor, some kind of a doctor, who they put in charge of this place. His name is Jerry Rea. And this guy was a professor at the University of Kansas, and he began working a number of years ago at the Glenwood Resource Center. And he was using these elderly, disabled people as test subjects. He had this idea that overhydration could cure pneumonia. And so he was force feeding these people liquids through a tube. So it wasn't like he was having them drink water over and over again. No, these people are intellectually disabled. They can't consent to any of these things. Their guardians were not asked. They were not requested if they would be okay with these experiments being done. These people were used as human test subjects. And under the watch of Mr. Rea, or is it Ray? I think it's Ray or Ray. I'm not entirely sure. We'll just say Ray. Under the watch of this evil doctor, Dr. Death, an unprecedented amount of people died. A very unusual amount of people were dying under this guy's watch. So let's see. Conditions were horrible. Human experiments were done on disabled people. And a lot of people were dying under this guy's watch. What happened to Mr. Ray? What happened to this guy? He was just given administrative leave. There was no criminal investigation done on this guy. Why isn't this guy in trial? Why wasn't this guy put on trial? And isn't it interesting that in the state of Iowa, it's the Republicans who have been resistant to the idea of investigating this, and it's been the Democrats who have been the most enthusiastic about this? I find that interesting. It's like, who's pro-life? I guess they're pro-life when it suits them. I guess they're pro-life when it's advantageous for them so that they can get votes. Why isn't this doctor or scientist or whatever he is put in trial? I mean, if a bunch of people die under your watch and the DOJ, in a 60 or so page document showing their investigation, presents details on how people were dying under this guy's watch, people were dying in Glenwood Resource Center, people were being experimented on. Even the DOJ said these people were human guinea pigs. Those are the words that they use, human guinea pigs. When you have all these facts, doesn't that warrant an investigation? Like I mean, there was an investigation, but doesn't that warrant a trial? Like if a bunch of people die under the watch of a particular nurse, okay, people die in hospitals all the time. It's understandable. But if you have an unprecedented amount of people, if you have an unprecedented rate of death occurring under the watch of a particular nurse, that nurse should be investigated. And there have been many stories of people dying at a very unusual rate under the watchful eye of a particular nurse, and they have done investigations, and they will find out that the nurse was the one killing these people. Nurses murder their patients. This happens more often than we would like to think. The most recent example of this took place in Germany. There was a nurse, I think his last name was like Hogels or something. This guy murdered dozens and dozens of people. At first they thought, okay, somebody died under his watch. People die in hospitals. Nothing unusual. But then over the years, it was like, a lot of people are dying. Maybe this guy is responsible. They did an investigation. They found out that this guy was a serial killer who was using poisons which were at his disposal to murder people. So we have human experimentation taking place. It was all over the Iowa local news a number of weeks ago, and this isn't major news. And they wonder why we say all lives matter. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.